Good evening. Child sex abuse by Church of England clergy was covered up in Sussex. That's the admission by the Bishop of Chichester to a former Eastbourne choir boy who was abused by a Sussex vicar. The Right Reverend Dr. Martin Warner says in an apology letter that there had been deception, cover-up, ineptitude and irresponsible lack of professionalism.
Well, Gary Johnson, who was abused by priest Roy Cotton, has applauded the bishop for his remarks, and he believes that the comments mark a positive step towards the Church of England acknowledging their past failings. The Bishop of Chichester has told us that none of the cover-up was perpetrated by recent or current senior members of clergy. Our Home Affairs correspondent Colin Campbell has the story.
It's an admission from the Bishop of Chichester which victims of abuse have been waiting many years for.
At this stage, for me, the acceptance of the cover-up and the denials are profoundly important. I think it's the only way for me to heal and move on.
The comments were made in a private apology letter sent to Gary Johnson, who now lives in the US. The former Eastbourne choir boy was sexually abused as a child by Reverend Roy Cotton. Cotton was allowed into the Church of England, even though he had a conviction for sexual abuse. In the letter, the bishop says he is deeply ashamed by the way Gary Johnson was treated by the church. He then appears to make more general admissions about the way sex abuse cases were handled. As well as deception and cover-up, the Right Reverend Dr. Martin Warner says there has also been ineptitude and irresponsible lack of professionalism. He goes on to say the church has not always been willing to admit these failures. Indeed, the arrogance of institutional pride, he says, has made things much worse.
By cover-up, I mean that a person in authority who has information deliberately, knowingly ignores the information, does not pass it on, allows somebody who is a perpetrator of abuse to move from one post to another, allows somebody who's a perpetrator of abuse not to be challenged, brought to account.
This is the first time we've ever heard a bishop in the Church of England, or any other church in this country for that matter, express in such strong terms how things went so badly wrong. To use terms like cover-up is exceptional.
The impact of the abuse was clearly evident after Gary and his brother Phil were evaluated by psychiatrists in order to gain compensation from the church, a process that often re-traumatises victims.
We'll talk about it in a minute.
Are you ashamed at all? The Diocese of Chichester has been plagued with allegations of child sex abuse, with priests being arrested, charged and imprisoned. Brian, who still lives in Eastbourne, was also repeatedly sexually assaulted by Roy Cotton.
There has been a deception and a cover-up here. I think that's from the church. I think that's pretty disgraceful. And I'm glad he's come out and said that, but for victims like myself, it's too late, isn't it? The damage has already been done.
We lifted the lid on safeguarding flaws which allowed clergy to abuse children and remain in position in 2010. Our investigations in part led to an inquiry headed by Dame Butler-Sloss to try to find out what went wrong in the diocese. The coverage also prompted the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, to launch his own investigation, which is soon to report its findings. We know over the years files belonging to priests who've abused children have been suspiciously incomplete, incriminating information not passed on to the police.
Bishop Warner needs to be applauded for being brave enough to be open and honest enough to engage with me in this manner.
One letter will not undo all the wrongs, says Gary Johnson. He does, however, believe it represents the start of very real change and new understanding.
Well, Bishop Martin Warner says that the most obvious example of the cover-up is in the case of priest Roy Cotton, but he also believes that further evidence may come to light with ongoing inquiries and police investigations relating to other clergy. Our Home Affairs correspondent Colin Campbell joins me here in the studio now. Colin, why has the bishop made these comments now?
Well, the Bishop of Chichester wasn't, it seems, expecting his comments to be made public. They were made privately, as you know, in a letter to Gary Johnson after the pair had had a meeting. Now, Gary Johnson wanted to publicise the comments, in particular the words deception and cover-up, to ensure other victims and survivors of abuse who haven't necessarily come forward heard what he was told in this letter. Now, until this letter, Gary Johnson hadn't received any direct communication from the church since coming forward as a victim of abuse in 1996. Dr. Martin Warner says that the letter was meant as a statement of his commitment to honesty and openness. But this afternoon, I asked him why it has taken so long for the church to accept that there's been any cover-up.
I think fear is a massive element of this. I think it's the fear of having to face the deeply, deeply uncomfortable truth that we have inflicted incredible hurt and damage on others. That is not an easy thing to live with. Some of the most searing experiences of my recent life and time here have been hearing from survivors what it has been like and how the church has destroyed their lives.
Well, the Bishop of Chichester says at present there is no evidence of any conspiracy. He says the evidence for cover-up has come from an inspection of files and those files which have been collated. We understand that in the weeks and the days ahead, Dr. Martin Warner will be sending out more personal letters and conducting more visits with victims and survivors of abuse.
OK, Colin, thank you very much.